Welcome everyone to Dolls of Our Lives. This is the show where we're reliving the American Girl series book by book, except here on Patreon where we're taking on things you suggested or that we're into that we think live in the world of the show. I'm Mary.
I'm Allison.
And today we've gathered to talk, in some ways I asked you to meet me by the fountain today for this recording. We will be talking about Alexandra Lange's Meet Me by the Fountain, which the subtitle, An Inside History of the Mall. Very exciting.
Which is almost as clever as Taylor Swift saying, meet me behind them all, which can be meet me behind them all or meet me behind them all, which is very clever.
Oh, wow. See, that passed me by. I never even thought about that. Wow.
There's all sorts of things that you can get up to at malls, which Alexandra Lange wants us to know all about. And she takes kind of an insider's view as, an expert on architecture, as a student, as a, lover of malls. She kind of takes all different angles with this book, and it's really interesting.
I was vibing on it. Yeah. So we're going to get into that and, our own mall memories, cultural touchstone moments for malls, greatest mall moments in pop culture history. Perhaps we can count those down or imagine those into being. But first, what's going on in your life? What's going on in your pop culture life? What's happening?
Yeah, we're already almost a full month into 2024. And so part of my, new limit I've set on myself is 1 hour of TikTok a day, which I've actually been pretty successful with, except the time that I accidentally did an override and fell asleep to an ASMR video. But other than that, I've been pretty consistent. So that's freed up time for other things for sure.
Such as?
Watching a little bit more TV, watching a few, Netflix specials, definitely doing some reading, just pining over my copy of Meet Me at the Fountain, kind of basic stuff.
Okay. Are you watching anything you would recommend?
Yes. So there is a great new show that is called Death and Other Details, and it's an Agatha Christie style.
I'm watching that too.
Very good. I really like that. I'm excited for that to all be out. And in book club this month for Patreon, we read a book called Winter House, which is actually extremely similar to the plot of that book. And it's sort of like the Wizard series first book, where a person whose life is terrible gets whisked away, but you can feel good about the author. So if you kind of young person who loves books, escapist fantasy, but not too heavy on the fantasy, very good. Highly recommend.
Okay. That sounds cool. Yeah, that show's been a lot of fun to watch so far. It makes you feel spoiled when a show doesn't give you all the episodes up top. And so it's hard to wait. But I'm also it seems like every winter I start rewatching all of the Poirot and Miss Marple and all of that. So I'm still in the midst of that. I'm enjoying that. And I'm still watching Columbo, working my way through Columbo. I'm 100 on the inside. I don't know what's going on with me, but that's where I'm at. And then also I've kind of gotten into this one woman investigation no one asked me to make, but I was listening to every blue moon I put on 99% Invisible, speaking of architecture. And because I do like storytelling that's sort of space-based, and it's a great place to find very great storytelling. And so they started this series on Robert Caro and his first book, The Power Broker, on Robert Moses. And I'm so I don't know what came over me. I'm listening to episode 1 where it's the host, Roman Mars. He has this comedian who's joined him, who's a huge Robert Caro fan. And he's dying to reread these books. Or this book, which is famously 1,200 pages long. He's I just love it. He's amazing. And then they interview Conan O'Brien because he's a huge Robert Caro super fan. And I've kind of gotten into this. It set me off where I'm but what about his wife, who I think also sold their house so this man could do the work on his first book? Because they were no one does this anymore. No one takes the time to deeply invest in another man's life and write a 1,200 page bio. And it's yeah, because you have to pay bills and you have to buy food and all this stuff. So how is this possible? So I don't know how that set me off. Then checking out from Libby book 4 of The Years of Lyndon Johnson, which is his life's work. I hope he doesn't pass before producing volume 5, but thoughts and prayers. I don't know what's come over me, Allison. I'm listening to the Robert Moses book on Spotify because a listener tipped me off that if you have Spotify Premium, you can listen to some audiobooks for free every month. I'm doing that while I'm cleaning, and I'm at night reading the LBJ book on my Libby app. Like, am I okay?
I honestly think if you can't do it in 400 pages, you shouldn't be allowed to. That's my opinion.
Really?
I don't think there's any story that is that complicated that requires that much writing. And I do think, as much as it's oversighted, I do think Mark Twain had a point that, you would have written something shorter if you had more time. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think well, I mean, so much is being made of this man's process where it's like he researches and then he's outlining and then he does the first draft in longhand and then he's typing it and he's reviewing the type. And that's great. I mean, I'm always loving hearing other people's process, but I don't know. I mean, there's part of me too that's like, if I'm really into the writer of a biography or a memoir, like I would keep reading. Like I enjoy this genre, but I'm just sort of like, what is going on? Like there's a phenomena around this man and I'm just trying to like understand it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm in a cult. It's really hard to know at this point. Keep an eye on me. I don't know if I'm okay. I'm doing that. And at the same time, also, this is like a diametrically opposed interest, but I stumbled onto Chappell Rowan's album because of our listening group in the Discord where people nominate an album and we listen to it through the week. And somebody picked this album. And like whoever picked this, I don't remember your name off the top of my head. I'll go find it. I mean, can't thank you enough. It's just brought me so much joy in the doldrums of winter. It's a great like dance pop album. And if you like Lady Gaga, early Lady Gaga, you would love Chappell Rowan. And I say this because as apparently an elder, I watched one of her concerts on YouTube while I was working. I had it on in the background. It was great. And she covers Bad Romance like 3/4 of the way through the concert. And I'm like, is she covering this as an oldie? Like as an homage? And I'm Lady Gaga's age. I'm like, I can't sit with this. And then she's coming to Connecticut. And I like texted some friends of mine. I'm like, am I too old to go to this concert?
Oh.
And they were like, yes, you are. They're like, as a gay like millennial, like you should not be at this show. And I'm like, okay, but I kind of want to go. And then someone else was like, no, you'd be fine. And then it sold out before I could make up my mind. So I've missed that boat. But if you're looking for just pure joy, it's very fun.
I mean, I don't think anyone would have told Caro that. They would have said, go and spend, a few weeks getting in deeper. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay. Like there's no limit, basically.
Listen, I accidentally went to a children's museum earlier this week because I do feel as though the marketing was somewhat misrepresented.
Can we back up? So what museum and how did you accidentally attend?
So the attendance was not accidental. I do think there was a case of misrepresentation. And I don't want to say what or where it was, but I think that certain elements were played up that were not accurate. And was I embarrassed to be there? No, because I don't feel that way. If you can explain science to a child, you can explain it to anyone. So I learned some things. I felt, that there were some areas that I would have enjoyed learning more or spending more time in, but, they were made for people under 3 feet tall. So the space was, cordoned off, not for me. So I think that could have been advertised better, but I think it's like 10% me, 90% how this place was packaged.
Okay. So, I mean, overall, you're saying you're not cutting it as a loss. It was like a win of a certain kind.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I always just like seeing museum design and how people do things and kind of like what they put out. Was it designed for me? No. I can admit that.
Okay. Did it have a good gift shop at least?
Yeah, it had a really good gift shop, and I had a pass from the library. I will also say a highlight of the past month, getting to see the Sargent exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts, which I think was really well done and also incredibly packed. Conversely, this Children's Environmental Museum, almost nobody there. I went at nap time. So
wow. You went at nap time.
You win some, you lose some.
Wow. I heard that exhibit was great. I was sad to miss it. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had a great time, like no matter what. And, who's to say what's for kids and what's for adults? I mean, look where we are. I mean,
yeah, I don't.
We will not judge.
Conversely, I will say there really weren't any children at the Sargent exhibit. I think they would have gotten a lot out of it.
Okay. That's on them. You put that on them. Like, what are we teaching these
I know.
kids?
The fact that it was a weekday, they might
Fair
be other
enough.
places. That's okay.
Okay. Fair. I heard there's an Alma Thomas exhibit in DC and it closes in June. I'm like dying to go to that. So that's my current art museum plotting. Maybe Boston would be more doable for me. Maybe I should dream smaller, but that's just where I'm at.
I think that Alexandra Lange would say, "Dream at the mall." That's where you're meant to dream.
Ooh, what a beautiful transition. That sort of was Allison. Thank you. And I will say should I apologize to you for the video I sent you just as we were about to record of an ASMR of a woman wearing a Mean Girls velvet sweatshirt, pink, of course, and she was doing an ASMR role play, Meet Me at the Mall in 2007. Very specific date, as you said, probably before the financial collapse. And you just kind of walk around the mall with her and she takes you into, among other places, the American Girl store. And it's delightful. I'll post a link to it. But ASMR, like for biological reasons we don't fully understand, either hits you like nails on the chalkboard or it's soothing like it is for me. So just be warned. If you've never tried it before, you're either going to love it or it's just not your journey. Not unlike the mall, Allison.
We are talking about a book that came out just about 2 years ago, and it's called Meet Me by the Fountain, as you said, an inside history of the mall. And we'll give just a little bit of background so you can kind of situate what this book is, because it's not so much a pop or a cultural history book of the mall. It's written from a very specific perspective. So, Alexandra Lange is the architecture critic for Curved. Her essays, reviews, and profiles have appeared in Architect, Dwell, Medium, many, many other, including The New Yorker. She's been a featured design observer and opinion columnist. No one's ever asked me to be that formally. And she has been a fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And here's just a little snippet about the book. Few places have been as nostalgized or as maligned as malls. Since their birth in the 1950s, they have loomed large as temples of commerce, the agora of the suburbs. In their prime, they proved a powerful draw for creative thinkers such as Joan Didion, Ray Bradbury, and George Romero, who understood the mall's appeal as critic and consumer. Today, amid the aftershocks of financial crises and a global pandemic, as well as the rise of online retail, the dystopian husk of an abandoned shopping mall has become one of our era's defining images. Conventional wisdom holds that the mall is dead, but what was the mall really, and have rumors of its demise been greatly exaggerated?
Wow.
It's a good write-up.
Very good write-up and a really interesting book, like taking on a history that I guess like we kind of knew, like bigger context history, like bigger changes in 20th century American history. And you can talk about like the consumer changes for women that help drive the success of the malls. But I did not know a lot of like the history of malls as spaces and sort of like what shaped the design choices for these different eras that she kind of takes you through.
And I think we have maybe talked about this before, but there's something about looking at a long history of consumerism and thinking about how buying things for a long period of time, like basic things or things like clothing or even fabric, was both an intimate and often antagonistic relationship, right? It was something that you did kind of face to face with individual people that were part of a bigger network. And I think part of what makes this book useful to people today is it feels like everything, or I should say, a lot of things that I buy, I have almost no idea where they came from or who made them or how, or really the mechanisms by which they ended up in a shipping container or in a truck on the way to my house. And the mall, I think, provides like a really interesting case study in a different way that consumerism changed now close to 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, let's maybe go back and think a little bit about the history that gets us to the mall because, you've studied consumerism more than I have. So you can maybe speak to this. But, what are the stages that lead us to like the mall? We have like what, small family stores and then department stores, or like what is the trajectory? Like what would women's buying experiences specifically be like?
So let's go back to Kaya. I think that actually makes sense. So Kaya understands commerce as trade, right? As both intimate relations and then part of larger networks. And trade is part of Kaya's world in the 17th century. When we get to Felicity, her family runs a store, right? And by virtue of her family running a store in the late 1700s, She's aware of politics in a way that her friends aren't, because they are on the path to changing their relationship with the whole empire that they're part of by not carrying certain goods and not paying certain duties or taxes. And when we get to, say, Josefina, right, there's this huge moment where she becomes aware of trade, and there's even some like trickery in her world. This is going on 200 years ago, but really shopping and buying things, that's a part of her life, right? Like there's markets and networks in her life. Kirsten sadly did not know them all, but Kirsten, right, when she takes the pelts, that's her participating in a larger trade network. I think a very old Samantha would be our first person who would have really had an interaction with something like a modern mall. But even Samantha, Rebecca, those kinds of characters, most of their interaction with shopping is still going to be with stores where they have to hand something over to someone and either be able to pay right away or to have some kind of credit system if they're allowed to have that as women. And I guess Molly would be our first proper shopper. Kit doesn't have money, let's be real. So
Kit's not going, no, that's not happening.
Kit is still trying to scrimp and save. And then what's fascinating is Julie and her mother, right, who's running a store, right? You see kind of commerce going through everything. She is selling stuff secondhand. That's kind of like an interesting innovation. Kit is living secondhand, not by choice. So really Molly, I think, is our first person who would have had this kind of mall experience.
Right. And then also like adversarial shopping versus like, this is what it costs. This is what you're going to pay. Like weirdly, Julie's mom would have been kind of maybe bringing back adversarial shopping. Like, I don't want to disrespect her store, but like maybe somebody comes in and is like, I'll give you like, you want 20, I'll give you 15. And, that stresses me out. So I would not have done that to her mom. But it's interesting to think about, like, the mall becomes something that is inspired by it's identified as a key part of American culture, but it's not really developed by someone who was born in the United States. So, like, she opens the book by talking about Victor. Is it Gruen or Gruen?
I would say the second. That sounded right.
Okay, Gruen. And he's from Germany. He immigrates to the United States, and he works as a part of the World's Fair of 1938. General Motors presented like this view of the future called the Futurama with like, the imagined cities of, the country fast forward 2 decades. And, he works as a part of that. And then kind of like she's making this connection that he sort of helps manifest this after World War II. And we have like the Highway Act of 1956 and all of these developments that make it possible for people to, one, own their own homes, like with the GI Bill and all these other affordances, but also, be able to get out to what we would now call suburbs and, create this sprawl. So he gets stranded in Detroit on a business trip. He walks around this huge department store downtown, and his like aha moment, to quote Oprah, would be like, this is dying. I should build this like outside of Detroit and like enclose it. And that will be like the beginning or the center of like this new town that he imagines will develop outside of major cities. So he's not seeing them all as like a isolated space. He thinks it's going to be part of like this almost small town that like, utopia that he's going to help design.
If you picture a very kind of old fashioned, either mill village or company town on the East Coast, or the kind of vision of like a specific kind of old Western town, there's a line of establishments where you can buy and sell things, right? And like, kind of in like the old fashioned vision, the sheriff is right next to the tavern, which is right next to the general store. He is seeing that people are now given even greater mobility, and people with a certain kind of spending money and access to the suburbs, they're basically going in and out of establishments, and they're having to travel as part of their shopping, but it's not pleasant, right? And there's multiple people in this book whose lives are changed by having a sticky back, right? There's someone who has this inspiration strike when he gets overheated in Texas, and he figures, I don't ever want to basically walk outside again. I want to
inspirational
be within the confines.
I love that. And, like, as you're saying, there have been many places like in the Main Street, air quotes of towns where stores are all next to one another and open out into the street. So the mall is basically just like a major innovation. It sounds like funny is literally like reversing that and closing that space and having them all open into like an imagined garden center, like with these beautiful like palm trees in some of the malls. And the first one is his first major mall is Southland, I think it's Southland. What confused me about the title of the first mall is like it's Southland in Northland. That's not it. Hold on. There's beautiful historic photos in this book. What I do love about architectural histories is they often have photos of the spaces. There's nothing I hate more than reading a book where they're like, yeah, this is like a very specific thing, but you're just gonna have to imagine it. We couldn't afford the rights. Thank you.
Southdale.
Southdale. I knew it was something like that. And isn't it like in a town called like Northland or something?
Where every day will be a perfect shopping day, which means more
Perfect.
than just protection from Minnesota's chill or humidity. And she's talking about how this kind of like early group of innovators, they're not trying to totally disrupt what already exists. There are smaller stores and there are department stores, right? The department store has been around since, Samantha's era, but they're trying to get people excited about moving between these shops of a different scale and to make the navigation
Right.
between these an experience in itself. That's kind of the innovation that she's interested in.
Yeah, and like the fact that you could go out for something that you need and then you kind of like forget why you're even in the mall and you're like, wow, I'm just sort of like walking around seeing all these things I want. And I can have lunch at the counter at Woolworths and, it's cool in here on a hot day and there's escalators and there's all of this stuff. It is an interesting kind of transition that she sets, but also that from the start that when people talk about the malls dying, it's like the malls have always been built to be rebuilt. Like from the beginning, she says, malls saw innovation because they sold innovation. Unlike other architecture that was built to last, malls were built to sell fashion and newness, and they too had to turn over every decade or so. Just as the Nashers, a family who built this still flourishing mall in Dallas, predicted. So that was really interesting to think about, like, can we really say something is dying if the whole, like, notion of its existence is that it must be reborn every decade?
She also makes a related point that she introduces in one of the early chapters, and then it comes up a lot. And I think something that, listeners will appreciate is this is not a person who hates malls. This is a person who's actually really interested in malls.
No, she loves them.
And is like critical of them, but also clearly enjoys spending time in them and kind of thinking about their purpose. She says, people often tell me that they get lost in malls. Malls are a habitat. Some of us are natives. If you grew up hiking, you know how to look for blazes. If you grew up with malls, you know how to look for the anchor stores, the fountain, the food court. Orient yourself to those cardinal points before you set out. And I found this to be a fascinating point because I have spent quite a lot of time in malls and I am almost always disoriented. I am both like, a person who has spent, like endless amounts of hours, especially as a teenager. And I do still find them incredibly confusing. So I think she's overestimating how much exposure helps when they are constantly changing.
I think that's true. I'd love to hear, like, what are your memories? Like, when you think about malls, like growing up, like, what are your memories of spending time in malls?
This book actually really made me think about the arrival of Walmart and what a big deal the arrival of both Walmart and Target were in my lifetime. And I distinctly remember my mother going on a trip and coming back and telling us that she'd been inside a Target. And now these worlds have kind of met because there are Targets and Walmarts that are part of the two malls that kind of anchor the town that I actually, was first born in and spent time in later as an adult. But honestly, thinking about the mall, a lot of times it was me being a tag along, or it was really just one of the few places that teenage friends and I could go to without any other purpose. And Lange makes the point over and over that that is part of the value of a mall. But that was really my experience. Like, we could spend just a few dollars and spend hours there. And I really liked the food court. And we had a Walden Books in my mall growing up. So I liked that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I had two malls growing up, and something that this book kind of reminded me of is that there's like this idea of like the good mall and the bad mall. And I remember my aunt like really not liking this mall that's in Manchester. It's called Buckland Hills. And then the other mall, which is like the fancier mall, is West
Of
Farms in
course,
West
West
Hartford.
Farms.
Yes. West Farms, I remember, had like a giant, for absolutely no reason, portrait of Napoleon on a horse, you know, like famous painting of him. And I just remember like standing and staring at it as a child, being like, why is Napoleon, like, what does Napoleon have to do with this mall? And it was like very near a Bath and Body Works. And I was just like, I don't understand what's happening here. So it's interesting that she talks about malls as like sites of public art. But um, like being in the air quotes good mall actually was a space that made me really uncomfortable because it just felt so fancy and like out of reach, because I did not grow up in a house where we bought clothes really at the mall unless there was like a super sale at Macy's or something. But like, you know, teenagers like with Abercrombie and Fitch, like that was around our time when that was like really popular and all of that. But I also remember the mall as like a site where it was like I would go with my mom to buy gifts for my grandparents and like relatives. And we would also like, if she had to go to a special occasion, like I'd go with her. And I loved the food court as well. The fact that you could mix like fries from McDonald's with like a slice of pizza felt like magical. But also that like I would watch her try on clothes. And looking back now as an adult, I'm like, oh, this is where I learned like a lot of like not great body talk, because, and you would hear it in the whole place of like women being like, oh my God, I look so fat in this. And it's just like, so it's interesting that she kind of like, this is not what her book is about, but I was kind of thinking like, what behaviors and sort of cultures also can you find in malls? Like you could use malls to tell all kinds of stories. So that was kind of like interesting to think about. But the Buckland Hills Mall was in the news a couple years ago because some rogue teens like all met up there and made people so uncomfortable they had to shut them all down. I don't know what they were doing. I'd have to look this up, but that's another point in her book is like, are teens allowed to be in malls?
She's very interested in malls as third spaces and kind of who controls the design of the parts that don't belong to specific stores, right? So she's
Right.
very interested in that. My mall always had a tagline, no more than four. If you were under the age of 18, it may even be 21 now, you could not congregate in a group larger than four. And I
What?
distinctly remember those signs going out. I remember it being a comment, and being there as a teenager in, you know, like late 90s, early 2000s, there were always cops on weekends, and they were checking that you weren't congregating in a group larger than a certain size.
Wow. I remember they had security guards at West Farms around, but it was interesting because they would only be around stores that they thought teens would like. So they didn't have the four rule, but like I remember seeing security guards always around like Hot Topic, which I always felt bad for them because the music is blasting. But then did you know Strawberries? Did you have Strawberries in Rhode Island? It's
We
like a
did.
music store. And they had like security guards around that too, because I really like Strawberries, but I was not a Hot Topic person. I'm not cool enough. There was a moment when I bought clothes at PacSun, and you know, we won't speak of those times, but that was like when I was skateboarding and I don't know what I thought I was doing. But like it's interesting that like the tell is like where they put the security in the malls too.
I think she is maybe I would say a lot more optimistic than I am about like the potential of using the spaces in a mall, right? Like the sort of
Mm,
fountain spaces or the middle areas or even the food court. When to me, a mall now is just constant surveillance. I feel like people are filming themselves or filming others. There are cameras
mm,
everywhere, there are security guards everywhere. And I find honestly the mall to be a more unpleasant place now than I ever did before. I feel like
hmm.
there's a lot of theft detection, but there's also just a lot of, you know, like formal surveillance as well as the kind of thing that you were talking about. It's a place that encourages you to buy a bunch of food. And then it's also a place where you're saying like fat phobia is rampant, and there's conversations
Yeah.
about how you don't fit into improperly sized clothes. You know, it's a very like
Yeah, it's a very strange place. I mean, the rosy memories I have of it are like spending nice time with my mom, but then also like I do think malls serve a purpose for like preteens who can't drive and don't have friends who can drive, where it's like I do remember being dropped off at the mall like for somebody's birthday. We would just like go hang around and like buy posters and go to TGI Fridays or something. And it was like, it felt sort of like a non-threatening place where like you would be safe, relatively speaking. And also like not in a Jane Austen way, but like this was before social media. So you could go to the mall and be like, oh, is that so-and-so like in the distance across the food court? And you're kind of just like scoping each other out in like a sort of consensual surveillance, like gossip culture, seen and being seen. But that's very different from now, like where you can just, as you're saying, go on like Instagram and Facebook and whatever, and you don't need the mall to be like the place where you see people from school.
I do think part of my maybe negative assessment, and I don't think I even would have said this 2 years ago, I feel like I've been buying a lot of the same stuff for decades at this point. I go into a Bath and Body Works and I'm still buying like the 3 for 3 body care. And so being a person who's bought a lot of the same things over and over for years on end, the staggering inflation does take so much of the joy out of it for me. Thinking of what I could afford to buy as a teenager who made $7 an hour, and thinking about the way that I get anxious being in a mall today because of rising costs, I think if she were to make a second edition of this book, there really is less pleasure in shopping when everything feels unaffordable.
That's true. And also kind of like the rise of sustainable shopping or like thrifting, like that would be an interesting conversation to put in this too. Like where did all the clothes go that were sold in the mall in 1960, whatever? And, where are people buying their clothes now? Like, is it cool if you're a teen to go to like thrifting or like Goodwills with your friends? And like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, where are people going now? Because even like she was talking about Hudson Yards as like a modern mall. And she noted that there's barely any places to sit down in there. I've never been there. And that's like an increasing trend in recently built malls, is that they're mostly vertical and they don't prize like lounge space. Like there's no benches where you can sit and people watch, which is like my favorite thing to do in malls. And there's very few like food spaces. There's food halls in the basement of these malls, which are thriving and which kind of like showcase local businesses, which she kind of celebrates, understandably. But it's interesting that it's like the malls are trending more high end, like places like Hudson Yards, but also not social spaces. Not, I think in her view, she's both critical of early mall developers who present this like utopian vision of a mall as like a community center, but at the same time, like she wants it to be that. So by the end of the book, she's kind of like, it can be that way if we want it to be that way. And like some of these repurposed malls that she's explored are like UT Austin, where they've developed a, subsequent campus, a satellite campus from what used to be a mall.
So people have been talking, all over the internet. This person, Molly Fleck, she tweeted about how she really wanted her library in Chicago to have an indoor safe play space. This was something that she was looking to have at her library. A slide, a little jungle gym, like a whole area dedicated to this because it's so cold in the winter. And this became a huge conversation on all different corners of Twitter and the internet, with people saying that's the job of parks and recreation. And I think sometimes when we have positive relationships with an institution, we want it to solve problems that it just can't solve. This person loves her library. So she wants her library to solve another problem in her life because it's already meeting so many of her needs. And I think I'm just not buying that a shopping center of any kind, and like been to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, like I've been to various like open shopping markets. I've been to Covent Garden, all these places. Maybe it's just me, but it's like the point is to spend money to get stuff you need, and to me, leave. So,
right.
Unless it's like really cheap and super fun. And yet I am a person who wanders around Target.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it reminds me, there's this quote she has in the part about Hudson Yards that I think is interesting and kind of speaks to your point. She says, like, for people who say the malls are dying, I would argue that the shopping mall was ever thus a corporate takeover of what should by rights be public space, and the privatization of what were once communal places and activities is at the heart of the original post-war American dream. American Dream, this mall in New Jersey that she goes to in 2019, just makes it bigger. So basically, like, I think what she's kind of saying is like when they get buy-in from towns to build these malls, part of what they're saying is like, hey, we're not just going to be a place that sells stuff. We're also going to provide like all this beautiful indoor, like landscaped garden space, like in Minnesota, where people can come in the middle of winter and spend time together. And so I think there's kind of selling a bill of goods in addition to the commerce piece of like, we're going to serve, this place will serve a public good. And, but in the town's allowing malls to privatize that, it means that it's not, she's kind of signaling it's not being funded in the public sector. So then like, where is it actually happening?
I think, a place too where part of this falls apart pretty quickly. She mentions that there was right before Christmas a massive Black Lives Matter movement, almost like a flash mob combined with a protest in the Mall of America, because people knew this was the easiest way to reach a huge audience, not just in their state, but to get national attention. And the protest was pretty quickly shut down, right? They did get attention toward their cause, but when you go into a Target, you're immediately under camera surveillance. They take those horrible photos of you while you're doing self-checkout. We have kind of fallen in love with a certain idea of what shopping can be or maybe should be. But I think, honestly, it's kind of out of desperation, right? Because when it is cold or when your library is closed or you don't have a great Parks and Rec, I have to pay for pretty much almost anywhere that I go to enjoy myself. I pay for a membership to the YMCA. And I do that in part because I can't just hang out at my library all the time. But I would love if more of my tax dollars went to places where I could do that, right? And where I had a right. If you go to a national park, every single one has to have designated First Amendment areas, where as long as you're not violating other people's rights, you're allowed to speak and to assemble. That is built into how we are made. The mall does not have that. Right.
And I think, because it's privately owned, they can make those rules and attempt to enforce them. But, I think in a broader cultural way, it's like you can look at the history of the 20th century in America, and this is like somewhat depressing, but to see like how many entitlements and rights have been stripped away from the expectation of living in this country. And, like you might have grown up thinking in the early 20th century that you could have one job in that country, that company would offer you all of these benefits. Like I had a great aunt who lived to be 95 and she worked at Aetna her entire life. And she was like, would take us there and be like, remember, oh, you guys weren't alive. But she was like, well, we used to have a bowling team and they used to take us to the beach and we had a company magazine and they had all these like, like very community creating services. And then none of that exists anymore. And, companies don't really feel like it's on them to take care of you in a whole host of ways. Got certain, political views would say the government shouldn't do that either. So where is that care happening? Where is the community attention happening? And, some people are trying to find it at a mall, I guess.
And I should say, I'm not trying to hate on malls. Honestly, like Abercrombie and Fitch was an important place when we were teenagers. There was something cultural happening there.
Something was happening there. I mean, I should have known my brother was gay before he came out because of the amount of time he spent at Abercrombie and Fitch. And like, were I of a different persuasion, like I too might have been there. But I mean, it did something for him. It was like a moment to like go be in Abercrombie and Fitch. It was like a moment to be just even at the mall, like for different stores that were popular at different times, or just like seeing and be seen. Like you could go walk around and hang out there. It's hard for people like Gen Z will never know. It's not the same. But I mean, the smell of like a Mrs. Fields cookie, you know what I mean? Like the pretzel, I always wanted the pretzel that tastes with cinnamon sugar because I like sweet things. But I mean, it just like hits different. My mouth's watering thinking about that. But my malls now are not the same. Like they're just, what's interesting around me, and she kind of talks about this, is like the mall. So like Buckland Hills had all the stores, Abercrombie and Fitch, etc. Then this developer came in and essentially built a fake looking Main Street down the street from the mall. And all of the fancy stores left the mall to go there. and they were successful for a while. And now a lot of those have gone out because Amazon has come in and so dominated a lot of these different spaces, but in the internet generally. So it's been interesting to see like the timeline that she tracks like play out near me, and I'm sure play out along, wherever anyone's listening. I'm sure you can think of similar examples.
I think for Lang, that's why the third space part of the mall has to be so important, because it's the only thing Amazon can't give you.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think, that's her hope by the end of the book, is that this is the thing that we will not tolerate dying, is like the need for this community space. And she ends the book saying the most fertile sources for inspiration may not be the department store anchors over large parking lots and undiversified food courts of the past life of the North American mall, but the transit-centered, community-embedded, active uses of present-day successes wherever in the world they might be. Imagine the mall being as physically embedded in place as it already is in culture.
She also takes us to other parts of the world, right, where the mall is something more, because it's just a number of different kinds of things connected together where people don't have to go outside. That is a huge element of part of what this is. And I think the saving grace of the mall is going to be very simple. It's going to be climate change.
I think that's right. And I think climate change is going to make malls more attractive, and also like maybe increase people's openness to mixed use spaces and like, stacking or putting like housing in a mall space so people can like literally not have to go outside and like get to a grocery store or whatever.
May also be telling my local mall used to have a certain stacked area of chains, like chain restaurants and chain fast food establishments. I will say Dunkin' opted to leave my mall. I don't want to speak about that. But in its place is local
Sounds
businesses.
Rough.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't keep a Dunkin' Donuts. Honestly, it was a corner that was very special to me. You went around and you saw a Dunkin' Donuts, and right next to it was a Payless shoe store.
Whew. Wow, beautiful. What a combo.
That was a combo, because guess what? For under $30, I was getting multiple things that I needed. Neither here nor there. But she's finding this inspiration, right? And I know that there's been a lot of cities, several cities that I've worked in, where they've really experimented with kind of multicultural dining rooms or cafeterias. I think most people now would absolutely be willing to give those a chance. And part of me thought, I don't want to waste any more sleep over a problem that's not really a problem. So only 3% of malls are actually at the state of, quote, dying, which is that they have 40% or more vacancy rates. I feel like I've been lured to care about something that is not actually an issue.
Interesting. So you think she kind of does get at those stats like deeper into the book. Like she owns it and is sort of like pushing back about like in some ways she's exposing that the fear of dead malls is not legitimate because they have not died at the pace that people are imagining. So then you kind of have to ask, then for whom is it meaningful that malls die? And like, why is their death productive and for whom?
So I think where maybe there's been some misread of death and malls, because she talks about why it's such a popular setting for zombie films, right? It kind of has a big high impact. I think it's because on some level, some of us feel dead inside a mall, right? You're in a completely weird, sterile environment. She digs into the fact that, certain stores like Hot Topic have always been associated with loud music of their own kind. Abercrombie always had certain smells, right? There's like the food smells or the cookie smells and pretzels. But the fact that a certain kind of music and air is pumped through malls to make you feel a certain kind of way, similar to a casino, I think it's the complete artificial shell of it that makes us feel like zombies. I don't think that malls spawn zombies, but it's kind of like a temporary situation. So I was like, I'm not gonna spend another minute worrying about malls. I'm gonna worry about people instead. Like, I think malls are gonna be okay.
I don't think she's worried about malls either.
No.
I think like she's sort of saying, in a way, I kept thinking like, in what ways are the ideas that she's talking about applicable to other kinds of spaces? And in a similar way, like I, spend a fair amount of time in doctors' offices, and I was thinking like medical spaces would be a really interesting comparison to this of like, a place where you go that's designed to almost like make you feel invisible. So like out of a concern for air quotes, like privacy, but it ends up being almost like stultifying, like how impersonal like a waiting room feels. And, you know, like, where am I? What's happening here? I'm surrounded by people, but talking to no one. Like, that's kind of a mall vibe too. Like, I wonder how she would sort of put those in conversation.
Lang also looks at people who walk in malls, which is a thing I'm very passionate about because I know people
Sure.
who do that and I've done it. I've walked inside malls extensively. I had a short period where I lived in Ithaca and I would power walk in the mall every day because that's where I picked up the bus and I loved it. It was a great experience for me.
Seems
And
great. Yeah.
the fact that part of why you would do it is you are kind of nameless and faceless, right? There's little communities of
Yeah.
people who do that, but she draws this contrast at one point. You know, some people don't want to go to a community center, especially older adults. They don't want to just hang out with older adults. They want to be in the middle of something and they want to be around people of all ages or the mall Santa or whatever else is going on at the mall at that time. And I totally get that. I thought that was a great point.
I think that's a great point too. And sort of thinking too, like in the history of women, like what does it mean to have a mall as a space where you can be selectively anonymous? But then also like, you know, I think her point too is like women can walk in malls because it's a safe place to walk. Whereas like a lot of places outdoors, like if you're on a trail by yourself, like some women don't feel safe. So I thought that was an interesting point. But also that's where I was like, it would have been interesting if she was like, but also women can feel unsafe in malls because of like toxic fat phobia and stuff like that. But anyway, regardless, or like, you know, the pressure to spend money you don't have and the rise of credit cards and et cetera, et cetera. But I guess that's not really like what she's all about. It's interesting because the first half is like sort of a chronology of malls, like the enclosed mall, then like the open air mall, like in San Diego, which is inspired by Ray Bradbury, which is fascinating. And this guy just goes to him and is like, can you write me a tome about malls? And he does. And he's like, you need to feel safe alone. And he's like, got it. Cool. I'll do that. And then the third space is like, you know, the vertical urban mall and whatever. But the second half of the book is like hard pivot cultural.
I'll just say with Bradbury, there is a great line. To not know where we are as children is a nightmare. To not know where we are as adults traveling is a perfect dream, right? Being able to kind
Yes.
of check out. I think that's something that people really like about malls. But also, we got the show America's Most Wanted because Adam Walsh was abducted near a mall.
Never forget. Yes, he was. I also like the line to the head of that, to be lost, how frightening. To be safely lost, how wonderful. And it's sort of like a place to be curious and like hide in plain sight. Like that's an interesting concept that you could kind of apply to all public space. But it leads me to ask you, like, in terms of pop culture, top moments of malls in pop culture, what stands out for you?
I think she's spot on that Clueless is kind of a defining moment, and that there's also
Mm-hmm.
great scenes of balls in Mean Girls. Something that my
Yes.
family used to quote all the time was, I believe, from The Fresh Prince of Bel Air. And it was one of Will's sisters saying, I shop, therefore I am. And we
Absolutely.
used to talk about that. That may actually be from the show Family Ties, but that was kind of a common trope that I really actually liked as a young person. I liked the cool older sister who was always shopping. That was a character that I
Right.
just always thought was really kind of exciting because it seemed like those people had their own life. They had things to shop for, they had places to be and friends to meet up with. And thinking about, you know, how we're kind of wrapping up our Julie series, along with Title IX, not long after that comes the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Part of why we could grow up with all of these women who seem kind of like upwardly mobile, or at least just have a lot of cash, and sort of the idea of the 80s and 90s girl with the credit card, that was the first generation to have that as a luxury. So I think maybe,
Right.
obviously I didn't know that as a kid, but that was kind of always my favorite in pop culture, like watching the teenagers on a show go to the mall.
That was a classic. And like Saved by the Bell, like they would go to the mall and, you know, all like California Dreamin', all these like shows that I watched before I was a teen that made me think being a teen was going to be a lot cooler than it was. Um, But yeah, I think also it kind of signals like you know what's cool. Like because malls are so ephemeral, it's like anyone who's going to the mall, like they must know what's on trend. They must know what's going down. I feel like I rarely do, never have. But I mean, I always felt like if I went to the mall, I was like sort of like following breadcrumbs, like, okay, like I'm gonna figure out like what's really popular here. But yeah, I think the Breakfast Club example was interesting in the book. Like, what did you make of that?
I have rewatched some movies of that ilk, and we did a rewatch of Pretty in Pink. I don't know. They're pretty tough. I'm not certain that they hold up. But again, I think it kind of gets you to that point of like, is the mall the place where you're all the same? Or is the mall the place where you really, it pulls out your differences, right? The differences that you have between people and your peer group become even more stark. And I think that depends a lot on your experience. But yeah, I didn't know how connected that was to a mall, that it was filmed in one.
Well, and also that like it was the library she reads as being like based on a mall
Mm-hmm.
or like modeled on the mall. Like I thought that was interesting. I never thought about that. Um yeah, those films have not held up great, but you know, it's an interesting point. For me, like Clueless is always going to be like the number one mall movie. I also like Mean Girls a lot too, although I have not seen the musical. Have you seen the musical?
I have not. I'm interested in it. I just haven't kind of braved it. The scene where Tina Fey is working in the mall as a second job and she says, I'm a pusher, will stay with me forever.
I mean, how can it not in her vest with all the buttons? It's just like, whew, dark days, dark days. I mean, I do wonder, like, what is more chaotic to you, the architecture of a mall or the architecture of Cheesecake Factory?
I love Cheesecake Factory. Like,
Me too.
when I have, critical commentary on the mall, it's not because I think I'm any kind of a special person. I love an indoor water park. I love a roller coaster ride. I love a lot of things that are unsanitary and strange and very middle America. I love a Cheesecake Factory, and I love when people joke that the novel they're reading is the menu. I think that's funny. I have a gift
That's
card to
great.
there. I can't wait to spend it.
I love that. I saw a friend of mine was there the other day and I DM'd her and was like, "Oh my God, are you on a date?" And she responded like with myself. And I was like, "Oh my God, wow. Like what an inspiration. I got to take myself on a date to Cheesecake Factory." I love that. I got to find it, that Twitter thread where someone's like, "Let me get into like how absolutely chaotic the architecture of Cheesecake Factory is." It only makes me love it more.
I agree.
I mean, it's incredible. And where I work, like I'm the advisor of the campus newspaper this year, which is like a giant question mark, but somehow I was deemed qualified. We won't get into it. But I was like, listen, guys, like as a treat, like at the end of the year, like, should we all go to Cheesecake Factory? And they were like, Mary, that's so cringe. Like, why would they were like, we hate it. Excuse me. They were like, we hate Cheesecake Factory. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm genuinely stunned by that. I'm like, what? I'm like, but you can get anything. And the cheesecake is amazing. And like, it's a whole vibe in there. And they were like, I'm like, it feels special. And they were like, no. They're like, absolutely not. Like, we don't see it. Like, is it generational?
Do they know that Penny Hofstadter got her start at the Cheesecake Factory?
Apparently not. I mean,
So I pulled up the list of the places that one can be a patron of in the Mall Madness Mall. And so I have kind of a
great.
quiz for you. If
Let's
you
get into it.
had to be the manager slash proprietor of one of these first set of spaces, which would you pick? The restrooms, keep in mind you can charge people to use them.
Is this Europe?
In my world, yeah.
Okay.
Coneheads ice cream, Vidiot's arcade, or Aunt Chovy's pizza.
Oh man, what a tough pick. I'm gonna go with Anchovies Pizza. I feel right about that. I would feel confident in the product that I'm putting out in the world. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. What about you?
Restrooms, because that means I own real estate.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm not renting, like I own that part of the mall.
How do you know I don't own anchovies?
I just know. I just know because you're paying
Okay.
rent to the mall. Whereas if you own and manage the restrooms, like you probably own the mall. Or it's pay to play.
Okay. Interesting.
And I've heard some things about anchovies, so I know the bathrooms are getting used.
Wow. Wow. How dare you besmirch my business? Yeah, I can't keep that in the show. I mean, people are going to not come to my support me. Oh my God, you're going to make me crusty. I don't need it.
So here's your second set of options. You can either choose to run the I Am Coffin drugstore, Suits Me Fine men's shop, Two Left Feet shoes, or Yuppie Puppies pets.
Absolutely not the pet store. Oh. Absolutely not, with love. I can't handle that.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's too much chaos for me. Absolutely not. I'm gonna say the shoe store. I could probably handle the drugstore, but the name is so like triggering to me because my home phone growing up, the landline, was one number off my uncle's funeral home. So people used to call all the time, like at the worst possible moment in their lives, and I'd be like, "I'm really sorry. Like, this is a house. Sorry." What a disaster. What about you?
I think I might take on the drugstore because I know there's always a market, but I don't know about the men's shop. I feel like that would be a lot of drama. Maybe also the shoe store. I think the shoe store is good. And it's like kind of the least cringy name.
Yeah.
Like they went for it. We have Ruby's Jewelry, Ding-a-Ling Phones, MT Wallets, Department Store. Like they were very silly.
I love that. Oh my God, I love a pun. So this is amazing. It's bringing me back. I owned Ball Madness. Did you own it?
I did play it. I don't believe that my family ever owned it, but I actually really kind of enjoyed, like I was reading the directions and I was like, this is kind of a fun game.
You know, it's like teaching you to be a consumer, like, you know, the American dream, but it was fun to play it.
I loved special situations, buying a pizza. Here's a quick way to get cash. If you can't go to the bank, then go to the pizza shop and try to buy a pizza for $5. It's a cheap purchase that frees you up to return to the bank.
Okay. I mean, sounds great. Is that the equivalent of like you pay with a debit and then you ask for cash back?
I don't really remember like a lot of the rules of this, but I do actually think it's really funny because of some of the technology in it. They have a statement from the FCC that says this equipment for the game generates, uses, and can radiate radio frequency energy, and if not installed and used in accordance with the instructions, may cause harmful interference to television or radio. And they're like, oh my God, if you're going to play this game, you should check out the FCC rules. They're like, we gave you Title IX and access to credit cards, and you get this.
And you get this. Figure it out. Wow.
Like, that's on you now. So
beautiful.
It did look fun, for sure.
I'm going to check it out. I'm going to see if I'm going to find it. I don't know. We'll see. I still haven't found my American Girls. I don't know where they are.
That's a Hasbro product made in Rhode Island.
Wow. I had to get that in there, huh? Wow. Well, this was a really fascinating like tour through malls, like whether or not the one thing we didn't talk about that I think is fascinating is like mall wave as a music genre of like basically just like taking existing music and adding echo to make it seem like it's playing in a big space. It's like, wow, okay.
If you could only visit one mall store for the rest of your life, what would you pick?
That's hard. I'm gonna say Strawberries, R.I.P. no longer exists, but I'm tempted to say Bath and Body Works because you know how I feel about Moonlight Path. What about you?
For me, it is Bath and Body Works because I have bought their stuff online and sometimes I've done it just to get a really, really good deal. It's not the same. You've got to be in the store. You've got to try out the stuff. You've got to be able to smell everything. Just about any other product I could get at a mall, I think I could get another way. Nothing compares to a Bath and Body Works.
That's so real. And like, I don't know an alternative to Moonlight Path. And this is a problem for me because you can't buy it in the store anymore. I had this whole conversation with this very nice person who worked there last time I was there. And I'm like, what happened? I'm saying to her, like, everybody loves Moonlight Path. Like, it's a classic. What's going on? And I'm like pointing around in all these like seasonal scents. And I'm like, none of this will last. Like, where is Moonlight Path? And she was like, well, they kind of play a game where they take it away and then they bring it back and then they take it away. And I'm like, I don't like the manipulation. Will I still buy it? Yeah. Listeners, if you know of a reasonable alternative to Moonlight Path, please write to me. I need it.
But it'll never hit the same.
It won't, but it's like in these times, like what if they take it away and they don't bring it back?
It's like when you buy imitation Girl Scout cookies. The girls
Right.
lose.
I just had 2 Oreos before this recording session. Still hit, and it was or actual Oreos, and I was like, you know what? They hit different
They do.
than
They
the store
do.
brand.
You know, there's Target at the mall. I can always go to Target another way. There's Macy's, you know, at least that's what we have around here. I can get those things another way.
Mm-hmm.
I can't walk in and leave to another establishment and leave reeking of like very
That's
overbought
right.
scents designed for 14-year-old girls. Not the
With
way
a
I want it.
headache. Yeah, exactly. That's not the country we signed up for, okay?
No, no, no.
Oh
It
my
certainly
God.
isn't.
That's my American Dream. Would you ever go to American Dream in New Jersey? Is it still open?
American Dream is there. I would happily go to the Mall of America. I'm fascinated by that. That just hasn't come up in my life.
Oh, I've been there. I went there on a research trip and I went in the summer and it was like one of our last days. It was like, I want to say 3 months after my grandmother died. So it was like very downtime. And my mom and my aunt came with me because they were basically like, we just want to go on a trip. And during the day, I was like, I will meet you tonight at the Mall of America. It felt like in a crazy sentence. Like, I'm going to go off and do research, have fun. I'll meet you there. I meet them at the Mall of America, and we ate at like an Italian restaurant that was made to look like we were sitting outside on a patio. We were indoors, and we're near the amusement park. Allison, you would probably love this. And I just heard people like screaming every 30 seconds at some big drop, and we're in an Italian restaurant. I was like, wow, this is such a vibe. Like, I loved it. It was great. And I'll never forget the best part of that day was I was like, how was your day? And my mom and aunt were like, they'd gone to a shrine earlier that day and they met a woman who was like, oh, you should go to like this place by this lake. It's so beautiful. And my mom was like, oh, we didn't rent a car. Sorry, whatever. And she was like, oh, I'll give you a ride. And basically my mom, who had told me that morning, do not accept a ride from strangers. Don't make eye contact with people on the subway. Like all of this stuff. She was like, yeah, so we met this lady and like, I don't know, like she did give us a ride. And I was like, oh my God, like what? And it's just like parents like going left on vacation. But we did have a great time in the Mall of America and they had an entire store for Peeps. And that's what has stayed with me.
I like that. I like a little eccentric
It's beautiful.
mall where it shouldn't be a whole store, but it is.
Exactly. And I do think that they kind of kept their shop count high by having like 3 lids and like 3 of everything. Excuse me. I don't know what it's like there now. I was there in like 2015. So it was a while ago. But yeah, I recommend it. It was fun. I had a great time in Minnesota. I would totally go back. I would love to go back there. But yeah, you should check it out sometime.
Yeah, tell us what you think about malls. If you think we're way off base or didn't talk about Auntie Anne's pretzels enough, I'm open to that.
Wow. R.I.P. No, wait, she's still out there. Yeah.
Oh, I just had one like a month ago.
Okay. I feel better now. Yeah, tell us your favorite malls, the scariest malls you've been to. I once went to a mall in Connecticut that will not be named that, you know, a family rented out a storefront and just to house their clown memorabilia collection. So I was just walking through the mall peacefully minding my business, confronted with the sight of many clown mannequins, Allison. And I am not a clown person. I'm just going to say that. I respect them.
Neat.
It's not for me. I was scared. I was like, why? What's happening here? It was too much for me, but I would love to hear your mall stories. We both would. Allison, where can people find us?
I'm at Mall Madness. No, I'm kidding. I'm at Allison
God,
Parks on all the things. I'm very easy to find. Can also, you're probably already following the show, but follow the show at Dolls Lives Pod on all the major networks. And Mary, where should people find you?
Please find me at Mimi Mahoney on Instagram. I used to have a Tumblr page that I believe was a pun on Mall Madness.
Oh.
I'm just remembering this now. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, I'm on Instagram at Mimi Mahoney. We love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your stories. We want to talk more on Discord. Feel free if you want to do a watch along of a classic mall movie, like hit us up in the watch along channel. Thanks everyone for supporting this community and the show. We so appreciate you, and we will, I guess, meet you at the fountain.